Welcome, everyone, to the Nerdy Magical Girl podcast. I am your host, Milady Confetti, and I am here with Cody Daigle-Orians. I said it right.
Oriens, yeah,
Orians.
close.
Oh my God, I did
Look,
say it right. I literally asked
all
you.
combinations are fine.
Okay.
Yes, I know what you meant.
Well, I am so glad to have you here. Thank you so much for just agreeing to be a guest here, because I am so excited to talk to you about all things Ace. Hi, Cody.
Hi, thank you. I'm so excited about this.
Me too. I wanted to start out, if you could introduce yourself to everybody here and talk about a little bit about what you do.
Sure. My name is Cody Daigle-Orians, but people mostly know me on the internet as Ace Dad Advice. That is an online project that I started. It's focused on asexual education, and it's a social media based. So across Instagram, YouTube, and all the places, I create videos and other kinds of content that just helps people understand what asexuality is, and also offers like encouragement and empowerment for like living your best ace life. I sort of see the project as like, if your queer dad was kind of helping you through ace stuff, that's the vibe of the project. And it's turned into a book, which is like totally cool.
That's so cool.
Otherwise I'm a writer. That's like the other part of my life. And apart from writing things like the book and doing the project, I'm also a playwright. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's me.
So that's how I found you. I found you on TikTok. I'm
Yeah.
glad we mulled that over before we went live, because I
Yeah.
was like trying to remember. I'm like, how did I find you?
Yeah.
But I don't remember which TikTok it was, but I know you were talking about asexuality, and I felt very seen and I felt very comforted.
Oh,
Like I know
perfect.
my mom and my stepdad are very supportive, but I know it feels like it feels a little different when it's like somebody who is you and identifies as you, and it just feels
Yeah.
like, okay, you're safe here. So it felt like a very warm hug, and I appreciate the work that you do.
Oh, thank you. See, that's really important to me. Is like part of the reason why I started it was like when I first came out when I was 18, I came out as gay, and I was surrounded by gay mentors who were just like lovely older folks who had been through that part of their lives and were encouraging and supportive. And I was sort of seeing that there weren't a ton of people who looked like me doing that same thing for ace folks, and I saw it as an opportunity to do that. And so like that, I'm glad that's what's happening. I'm glad it's
Yeah,
doing what it's supposed to do.
yeah. So we have so we're gonna be talking about your book
Mhm.
today, and I use kind of the format of your book to kind of formulate how our discussion is gonna go today.
Cool.
Yeah, so I wanted to just kick it off and just start for people who don't know. What is asexuality? I have like the Merriam-Webster's dictionary
Mhm.
here. Is the lack of sexual attraction to others, or low or absent interest in or desire for sexual activity. I know how to read. I promise you.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's it. The only thing that I would add to that is that, I always sort of introduce it as a sexual orientation because I think that's important. I think
Yes.
a lot of people sometimes sort of think of, like, asexuality as, like, about behavior or about, how often you may be interested in you wanna have sex or do have sex, but it is a sexual orientation just like any of the other sexual orientations are. What separates it from the others is that, asexual folks either don't experience sexual attraction or only sometimes do or under certain kinds of circumstances. Or as that definition says, there's a very low interest in sexual activity that can also be part of that as well. But yeah, that's
Yeah.
spot on.
Yeah, I love pretty much that's how your book starts out, and it starts with like, the Merriam-Webster section. It's like,
Yeah,
this is great starting point. Now here we're going to expand into everything else, because I feel like, because that is literally just one sentence,
right.
and it can feel very restrictive, because it's like, okay, if I do feel sexual attraction, does that make me weird or anything like that? And I know you discuss, the overall, like, what do you say, overall like behaviors or patterns of behavior versus just like those one pop-up things that are just weird. Um,
Yeah.
but I love that you expand it into that. So it's just like, yes, this is a great starting point. Now let's expand from here. That's what made me feel very comforted, because the way that I was introduced to asexuality, for me coming out, well, me discovering what asexuality was actually through my GYN. He
Mm.
was this,
Mm.
yeah, so he was just this Russian guy in LA when I lived in LA. And I asked him, I said, is it weird that I don't have an interest to have sex? Like, is that strange? And he was just like, oh no, sweetie, that I can't do a Russian accent, but it was a very thick Russian accent. He was
Yeah.
like, no, that's called asexuality. Go get a pamphlet. So go get a pamphlet about that in the lobby and go pay your copay. I'll see you next year.
That's
That was
it's
the
a I
conversation. That was the whole
you're
conversation.
You're probably the first person I've ever known who's, like, learned about asexuality from literally another person as opposed to the internet or Tumblr or something like that.
Yeah,
Like, that what an amazing doctor. That a
yeah.
lot not many people have that. That's amazing.
He's a funny guy, yeah, and he's very like cut and dry and stuff like that. But the way that he presented it, it was so casual.
Yeah,
And like, yeah, he's very serious and things like that, but it was just so casual. He's like, oh no, that's called asexuality. You'll get it. He also had information for that, like
that's
literally in
so
the
great.
lobby, and said, pick up the pamphlet, go pay your copay, and then get out.
Now that's a doctor. That's the doctor we should all have.
Yes. One thing, so I wanted to talk to you because speaking about, not feeling attraction
Yeah.
and things like that, I want to talk about arousal, libido, and attraction. And I know you do a lot of posts about this all the time on TikTok,
Mhm.
Instagram and things like that. But in your book, you use an analogy to describe the three. And I was wondering if you could go over that because I absolutely
Yeah,
love it.
because, like, it is a thing that I get so many questions about, and a thing I'm realizing that people feel so much confusion about, because, like, in the larger culture, we just sort of mix all those 3 things together, arousal, libido, and attraction just all kinda get lumped in one bucket, and we all think they're all the same thing, but they're all totally different. So, if we break them apart, we start with arousal. Arousal is a thing that's happening in the moment. It is a thing that's happening to you. It's your body waking up to the idea of something may be happening. It can be caused by something outside of you, or it can just be a thing that happens sometimes. But it is very much tied to the moment. It comes, it goes, but it's the thing that's happening to you right now.
Yeah.
Libido is different. Libido is a way to sort of think about arousal, the intensity and frequency of it. So if you are a high libido person, would be somebody who has like either they're frequently aroused or they're like intensely aroused. Like those experiences are intense. Low libido would be the opposite. Hardly ever happens, or it's very low intensity all around, separating those 2 things. So you can I always sort of think about libido as like the volume settings on your arousal,
Yeah.
which like that helps me a ton understand like what's happening in my body most of the time. Attraction on the other hand is like the direction. So it's the direction in which all of those experiences are headed. Are those experiences directed toward someone of the same gender? Are they directed towards someone of a different gender from yours? Are they directed to just anybody of any gender without discrimination? Or for a lot of us, are they directed to no one of any gender?
Yeah.
That's attraction. Attraction, is like, I think I'm pretty sure I'm getting that. Attraction is like the song that's playing on the radio,
Yes.
like
Yep.
yeah, like, so, like, libido's the volume, but attraction is the specific song, the specific arrangement of the notes that's playing on the radio.
Yeah.
And when you sort of think of them in that way, it helps you break apart what your experience is. And for asexual people, that's important because for us, our experience of those are not the expected experience. It's not what all the allos and everyone else feels. So it helps us understand how to shape those things out. And we're still ace.
Yeah. Because I am somebody who experiences, I have a very high libido.
Mhm.
But like when I have those like intense moments, like I don't want to do anything. I'm just like, I guess I'll just sit here.
Like,
I'll just sit here because I'm like, I'm not doing anything with this. Like it's just like something like I just something very heavy like I hold in my hand and
I
I'm just
love
like,
it.
I wish I could drop this, but
I
I
love it.
can't. So I'll just sit here until the storm passes.
And that can totally trip people up, but that makes
Yeah.
total sense because attraction is there's no direction for it, so
Yeah.
it just hangs out.
Just like, okay,
Perfect. That's asexuality.
this is
That's
fun.
that's that's as asexual as someone who does not have has a very low libido or doesn't have that experience at all.
Yeah. Question. How did you so you talked about this one experience. So you were
Mhm.
talking about like you went on a date when you were very young and you went back to, this person's apartment. I love the way
Mhm.
you described this person's apartment, by the way. I was sitting there
Woo!
cracking up. You were so nice about it, but like
Oh,
low key, it
bless
was
your
like,
heart, right?
this is a
Love it.
dilapidated place. um, and then like the inevitable question came up of, so what do you want to do next? Um, when did you come about to realize like what you were experiencing was asexuality? Like when did you come to
Yeah.
realize like what that word is or the definition or what that
So
moment was?
a lot later. So that story, like that apartment, that apartment, God bless that apartment. That apartment and those experiences, those were all in my early 20s. But I didn't come out as an asexual person until I was 42. So that's like 5 years ago.
Mhm.
Because when I was in my 20s in the late 1990s. So there was no way for me to find information about asexuality. There wasn't an ace dad. There really wasn't much of an internet for me to go to and find
Right.
information about it. So I didn't have access to the idea of asexuality. So there was no way for me to like think about that's what it was. I interpreted those feelings of like, what do I want to do with this feeling? Nothing, as something being wrong with me. That's kind of how I
Mhm.
understood my identity for a long time. I understood myself as gay, but kind of broken, and
Yeah.
gay and a little bit messed up, when in reality something else was happening. So I found asexuality thanks to Tumblr. My husband told me to get, my husband's younger than me. He's like, hey, you're gonna want to waste some time, get on Tumblr, check out the art and the queer stuff on there. You'll really dig it. And I found posts on Tumblr that were talking about asexuality. And I just had this moment of like, oh my, okay, that's me. That's what I'm experiencing and what I've experienced my whole life. And further down the rabbit hole, I really started to connect. Yeah, asexuality is what has been my experience for my entire life.
Yeah. One thing, because when I was in undergrad, I was studying women and gender studies, and we took a lot of like human sexuality classes that were
Mhm.
required in the concentration of all that. And one thing that I knew, but I wasn't like sure how to access that information was that queer studies is not new. It's a very
Mhm.
like old thing that has been building like for centuries.
Yeah.
It's just depending on where you live, do you have access to that information? Florida. Sorry y'all.
Mhm. Deep South. Yeah,
Deep, very
Louisiana.
deep
I hear you.
South.
I hear you.
But a lot of my because a lot of my stuff like came from like resources like University of Penn. Like they have like a lot of
Mhm.
archives when it comes to queer studies where I like kind of head go first into understanding queer theory. So a lot of it has evolved over time, just like
Yeah.
any form of theory. Like I know we'll talk about Kimberly Crenshaw
Mhm.
later, and like even from like the 1980s with intersectionality, that has even
Yeah.
evolved into something
Yeah.
different in 2023. So yeah, that's one thing I really like that you referenced too about like understanding all these things, even Tumblr, but even though before that, like this has been something that has been discussed for a very long time.
Yeah, there is a piece called by Lisa Orlando. I believe it's from I want to say 1972, but that date could be wrong. But Lisa Orlando was a feminist activist who wrote
Hmm.
the Asexual Manifesto, and she was sort of establishing asexual as a thing. And we have seen asexual people documented and as part of studies, and asexuality as part of studies into the late 18 all the way back to the late 1890s.
Yeah.
And so we have been present, just not so much accessible. And that's not really a surprise, because the I guess like the mission or the project of the larger culture is to make sure that we don't have access to queer things and queer stories and
Yes.
queer history. And we're seeing that project come to fruition more powerfully now, as they're getting rid of books and erasing us from like public discourse and libraries and things.
Yeah.
But yeah, we've always been around, and there's a long history of us talking about ourselves and writing about ourselves.
Yeah. One thing I know that you jumped in after talking about the big three definitions that like blew my
Mhm.
mind. We're talking about the asexual spectrum. Also,
Yeah.
if you can't see my stream, I have like a ace flag transition. I've had it for like I've had it for what, like 2 or 3 years. So I don't know, I just wanted to gag over that.
I love it.
Um, but you have the big umbrella labels, so asexual, gray sexual, demisexual, and ace flux.
Yeah.
If you could just briefly go over like what those things are, the umbrella
Sure.
terms, and then we'll expand from there.
Yeah. So asexual, while it's the big word that covers the whole umbrella, also are used by people individually to describe not experiencing sexual attraction ever. I identify as asexual because that's my experience, the pattern of my experience.
Yeah.
Gray sexual folks are folks that fall somewhere in between. So it's the experience of maybe sometimes experiencing sexual attraction, and but mostly not, or experiencing sexual attraction at such a low level that it just doesn't even matter.
Right.
So maybe you do experience it often, but it's so low it's kind of irrelevant. Those folks can describe themselves as gray asexual. Demisexual is sometimes looped under gray or its own thing, but it describes people who generally don't experience a sexual attraction, but do when they develop an emotional bond with someone. It can be a strong one or maybe not a super strong, but if there's an emotional bond, then sexual attraction starts for them and they can experience it. But otherwise, they just sort of experience life as an ace person. And Ace Flux is like to me the cool one because it can be sort of it can be everything. For Ace Flux folks, that their experience of sexual orientation can change and move through different phases. Like the flux being the important part. So sometimes maybe they're allo, sometimes maybe it's demi, sometimes maybe it's ace, but it moves from place to place and shifts periodically and shifts. There's a lot of fluidity to it.
Yeah. I know, I told you this during our first meeting, but I'm gonna repeat here because one of the first people who I spoke to about coming out like as I don't this is complicated. So when as a content creator, and I just kind of felt like maybe I should say something because as an asexual person, I didn't see myself represented
Right.
in at all. That was kind of like, it's like LGBT, and then I was like, wait, but what about the A? We're over here too. Hi.
Hmm.
But I didn't know how to properly word it. Even though I graduated with a writing degree, sometimes when I'm very emotionally invested, blinders get on, and then I get nervous
Yeah.
and anxiety, and then I just crash and cry on this floor. So I asked my friend, that nerd Violet, because she was a teacher. I said, "Can you help me write this out for a post?" And what we came up with, because I said, "Is it normal to say like I feel between asexual and gray asexual?" And I feel like I fluctuate between the two. She was like, "Yeah, that's perfect." And then she like kind of like gave me a rough draft, and I made it sound more like
Mhm.
me. So I mean, that means I put spelling errors in it, and and then I posted it. But then when I found out what Ace Flux was like 2 months ago when you made that post, I was like, "Violet, did you know about this thing?" But then she went back and literally pulled up the thing. She was like, "We literally used the word
It's use the
fluctuate.
language.
We
I love
literally
it.
used it." So like the whole time it was just like there, and I'm
You
like,
knew. You knew.
new, but like I was just like, I didn't know that was like a whole thing. Which I think like one thing you talk about like in your book is the importance of labels and also micro labels.
Mhm.
Because that is like you find community in that, you find validation in that. Um, and I think like that's the most empowering thing that like I took away from your book, because it's just like, people like, we'll talk about microaggressions and gatekeeping later, but like
Yeah.
sometimes when you like bring things that might be newer, because language is always changing, language is always building upon each other, then sometimes like people get very weird. There's pushback. I'll say there's
Right.
pushback.
Absolutely.
So having like even something is saying like, oh, ace flux, like I have a thing that can define me and that makes me feel comfortable. It's just very empowering, and just I feel very valid.
Yeah, no, I always say that like labels they do two things. They help us describe our experience to ourselves and then also to describe that to other people so that we can find community.
Yeah.
And like who those are two things that are essential for us to feel like our full selves, to be able to
Yes.
understand ourselves and then also find our people.
Yes.
So labels are enormously powerful, even though some people may find them annoying. And I know people that give the micro labels such a hard time because they're like, why do we need this?
Yeah.
But some people do, and for the people that do need it, for the people that find themselves in those words, that's enormously fulfilling and powerful for them. So lay off the micro labels.
Yeah.
Just let people find their language, and that helps them find their people and find themselves.
Yeah, I love because in the section talking about micro labels, you said often, like you repeated it to like drive it home that, labels, micro labels, they're tools. They are tools to find the exact language for your experience. And
Mhm.
you kept repeating it. It's just like, I hope people get it.
I hope people get it because I say it all, labels are tools, not tests. I say it like
Yes.
all the time.
Yes.
But I believe it's true. They're tools to help us kind of get through the world. And as we change, we can find new words. We can get rid of words that we don't need anymore. Grab new ones. We can take a bunch of words and bring them together and describe ourselves that way. Um, that's how we become our best selves.
Yeah. One thing, in one section in your, oh my goodness, I went to the wrong thing. I went to the wrong screen. I was like, none of us were there. It's like, all right, show's over. One thing, I really like, felt deeply in your book, was the section that was labeled, am I really asexual?
Mm.
You brought up things about representation. You brought up, that a lot of our culture revolves around sex. So that's the thing that's the thing that literally sells. That's the thing that's pushed, to the forefront of everything. Feeling like you have to convince others and like all those what ifs. Um, what would you say, I guess, for folks who are out there who may be, wrestling with that question? Am I really asexual? Am I enough?
Mm. Um, two things. One, like, is to we all sort of go through this experience of really doubting even our own understanding of ourselves. And I think it's really important for us to first, like, really take a minute to figure out where those voices of doubt are coming from. Are there real questions that you have, or are they coming from messages you're getting from outside of yourself, from the world, from like the advertising messages, from the media messages? Because the world outside is constantly telling us that we should not be ace. We should be het- the world tells us we should be heterosexual, go get married, have some kids, and work real hard and pay our taxes. Like
In this
that's what
economy?
exactly.
Child.
Like that's what the world wants us to do. And so we have these messages all the time that our experience, which is different from that, isn't valid, isn't real, it's fake, it's made up, it's a problem that we're having, we're broken. And if we can start to understand that those voices of doubt within ourselves are born from those outside things, that has nothing to do with what's true about ourselves. We
Yeah.
can sort of like my friends with advice says, like, don't sign for the package. They can deliver the package to you, but you don't have to sign for it. You can say, okay, thank you, negative message, but I'm not going to believe you about myself. I'm going to hear you. I'm going to push you aside.
Yeah.
And then ultimately, do you have to know for sure? Not really. None of us really ever know for sure that we are absolutely a thing. We grow and change throughout our lives. Throughout our entire lives, our experiences are gonna shape us in all kinds of ways. But if you understand this is where you are right now, and this is who you are right now, and it's the truth for you, then take on that language and take on that identity. It's your context right now. If it changes later, that's cool. If you learn something different later, also cool. Just change the words and carry on. But like if you're living what's true for you in the moment, it doesn't matter if like you fit a checklist or if the world agrees with you, or like the asexual police give you
Not the
a
police.
thumbs up, like like
Yeah.
none of that matters. If you're living your truth, and if, for example, like if you're questioning and asexuality resonates and feels true to you, that's cool. Go ahead and put that coat on and wear it until it doesn't fit anymore.
One thing, because I'm not gonna get emotional because I'm very sensitive. So I'm just because I don't really the impact that like this and you have like had in my life has just been very it's just been amazing. Because when you talk about like, am I really asexual? Because I used to like do a lot of cosplay things, like
Mm.
back to back, and there are some characters like Psylocke, who is from X-Men, who she's a really dope character. But a lot of comic book characters, especially women, they're very sexualized.
Yeah.
And one thing I had somebody who told me, they like, you pull off sexy very well. And there's a lot of, but the thing is like, I'm like, are you saying that because like I'm a dark skinned Black woman and you expect us to be hypersexualized? Or like, because the thing is, it's like that feels like in conflict, like, well, am I actually asexual? Because like I can take a picture and do like a smize and like do a
Yeah.
sexy look. Thank you,
Yeah.
Tyra Banks, for that one.
Yeah.
But you know what I mean? But like it's just something that like even like small comments like that have
Yeah.
like affected me. I'm just like, well, wait a minute, I need to like sit with that because I do pull that off well. I look at my picture, I was like, okay, well, damn, who are we bringing in? But like at the same time, I'm just like nobody.
Yeah.
Literally, no. I'm just looking at a camera. There's nobody there unless somebody's taking a picture, and I'm still not looking at that person.
Well, but I don't necessarily. Those things don't necessarily. They're not in contradiction with each other. I mean, they're not in contradiction at all. Like you can be sexy and ace at the same time.
Exactly.
Yasmin Benoit demonstrates that all the time as like our one of our like greatest activists and advocates out there. She proves that point all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't change the truth of who you are. Um, yeah, and like very sincerely, I'm so stoked that we have you in the world being
Stop.
like an ace advocate. No, like it's really wonderful. It's one of my favorite things has been through this whole process of ace dad advice is really getting to find other ace people who are taking their platforms and telling their stories and showing just how diverse and how incredibly amazing the ace spectrum can be. That, my experience is very different from yours because, like, I'm 9,000 years old and
Better stop.
you know but we're both in the community, and we're both telling our stories and sharing what it means to be ace, and we're helping other people. Like, I'm glad you're here. I'm glad that
Oh,
you're doing what you're doing to make not just like the world better for you, but also for all of us. Like, collectively, we're all helping tell the ace story, and that's awesome.
yeah. All right, I'm sensitive. I told you I'm gonna cry. So I'm wearing Fenty Beauty. Don't make me run my makeup. It's Black History Month, Cody. Don't make me run my makeup.
Oh my god. Ah.
I want to talk to you also about the language of physical intimacy. Because I know there's actually
Yeah.
a lot of conversations actually talking about physical intimacy, and I don't think from the ace experience. I think it's more so like for people who are attracted to men. Talking about physical intimacy and like masculinity and that type of
Yeah.
thing. But from the asexual perspective, the terms that you had out there were sex favorable, sex neutral, sex averse, sex repulsed.
Yeah.
Could you explain like a little bit, like briefly, like what those are?
Yeah, sure. So these are just like a set of language to help you describe like how you relate to physical intimacy and sex. Sex favorable folks are people who thumbs up to sexual activity. They seek it out, they enjoy it, it's fun, positive vibes around sex stuff. Sex neutral folks, exactly what it means. No feeling either way. It's not bad. It's not great. There's just no feeling about it. Will can participate in it if they want to, but there isn't a connection, positive or negative, to the act, so it's just neutrality.
Yeah.
Sex averse folks are folks who do have negative feelings about sex, but are comfortable with like sex stuff in general. So a sex averse person may say like, no, sex isn't really for me. It's not a thing that I want to do or include in my life. But there isn't the negative feelings aren't so strong that like talking about it or seeing it or having that sort of the stuff around it, it doesn't bother them. They're comfortable with sex in an abstract way, I guess.
Yeah.
Sex repulsed folks, that's different. For sex repulsed folks, there are really, really strong negative feelings about it. So that can go as far as like actually having physical responses. So maybe that's like getting the shakes or feeling nauseous or experiencing panic attacks or anxiety attacks with negative feelings about sex. So that's kind of like the range of you can tack this on to your label
Yeah.
to help people understand not just how you experience attraction, but also how you relate to sex itself.
Yeah. I think like after reading like when I was, before reading your book, I was like, oh, like I think I'm more like sex favorable. But then I'm
Mhm.
reading your book, I'm like, no, I'm actually very neutral. It's just like I
Eh,
have the thing in my hand and I'm like,
yeah,
this could just drop on the
yeah.
floor and I could just go about my business.
I
Like
sort of move between the two. Like sometimes I'm sex favorable, but most of the time I'm like, "Mm,
eh,
sure."
it's a
I
day
mean, I
ending and
have this
why.
book. There's this book I really need to finish. So
Real
can I?
literally. Or
I
like
just
you
bought
find me
this
playing
book.
Dragon Age for like the 1000th time.
I gotta catch up on the Great British Bake Off. I really
For
don't. I
real. For
can't.
real.
There's not the time. Yeah.
um and I love that you again have like I guess have those labels on there, so when you have whatever your main thing is, you have those subsequent things that help you um explain or communicate or just find your people of who you are and how you identify. um the one thing, so we're gonna talk about coming out. I'm very
Yeah.
very excited to talk about this. So you recently did a Instagram post about this. I haven't been on TikTok a lot because I've been protecting my
I
mental health,
know.
but I know it's on Instagram, about talking about like when is the right time to come out. So when is the right time to come out?
It's the least satisfying answer, but really the right time to come out is when it's right for you. I feel like there's a lot of pressure that we have just in general to as queer people overall to come out. And I think there's some good reasons for that pressure to exist. But ultimately, it's up to you to decide when sharing that part of yourself is the right time to share with other people. So, like external pressures aside, the right time to come out is when you feel comfortable and you feel confident and you feel safe. Um, Safety is enormously important. It's okay to be in the closet if you feel like your practical living situations could be jeopardized, like if somebody will kick you out or you're gonna like lose your stability, financial stability or home stability.
Yeah.
Don't come out. No pressure to come out. It's not the right time. But if it does feel like it's the right time, that's when it's good to come out. And that can also change from situation to situation. Maybe with your friends, the time is now for sure. Maybe with your family, it's not the right time because they're not in the right place to sort of receive who you are. Um, and always remember, coming out of something that we go through our entire lives, we just keep on doing it over and over and over again.
Yeah.
So you're always sort of judging each situation. Is this safe? Do I feel like this person deserves to know this about me? Because
That part.
that's important. Like
Yes.
it's a gift. When we share ourselves with somebody else, that's a gift. Me telling my truth with you is a gift,
Yes.
and you better earn it and deserve it. If they don't deserve it, you don't have to do it.
Yeah.
No need for that. When it's the right time is the right time.
Yeah. I know for me, I did a campaign with Twitch Pride in 2021. I believe it was 2021. All the past years have been blurring together, so it could have been
It
last
still
week for
feels
all
like
I know.
2019, right?
um but so Twitch, I didn't know, like participating in Pride at the level that they were going to have me participate in was like, we're going to put you in a New York City billboard with the ace flag, and I was like, cool.
Yes.
I have to tell my mom. Because like, you can't just have your child's face in the middle of Times Square and be like, is that my daughter? Like, wait, what? So, I felt the need to tell her about that. I told her first about the campaign and what Twitch was doing. Her first response, being the awesome mom that she is, she said, are they paying you? I was like, period. First of all, mom, you know.
Yep.
Number two, she was like, what is it for? And I said, it's for Pride. And she was like, can you explain like what that means? Because she thought it was like Black Pride. I'm like, not the Black Panthers. I love that. That's where you put me. I was like, but not that.
That's great. Yeah, like why not?
I was like, okay. But I explained to her, I was like, talk about the history of Pride, talk about Stonewall. And, she was asking me, so she was like, what does that mean for you? And I told her about asexuality. I told her about my Russian doctor. I told her about like my experiences with like sex and intimacy, and how like that has always been a struggle to me. I didn't fully even understand what the mechanics of sex was until I was 18, and then did it. And I was just like, oh, this is boring. So yeah, she was very accepting. I think there was also a caveat of, because then like my stepdad was there too, and his son is bisexual. And from what I understand, I wasn't physically there, like between him and his son, that conversation didn't go well. And it was years ago. So like, I didn't even know he was in earshot. I thought the Cowboys were playing. I didn't think he was paying attention to me. So, there was, my mom asked me, she was like, so like, who do you date? I was like, Mom, when was the last time you saw me on a date? One, but two, I was just like, and I'm like, I'm like, because I feel like, because I am, when attraction happens, it's towards men. I feel like that is like why I'm accepted, because if it were different, I don't know if that would be so acceptable. My stepdad, I guess from things with his son, did a lot more research beyond their conversation many years ago to learn about that. And he actually like explained to my mom, he was like, no, there are people who are in the, the LGBT rainbow space, his description, who are bisexual, who are straight facing, his terminology. He said, he's like, that does exist. He's like, I already knew about that, and then went back to whatever he was doing. So that's pretty much how the conversation happened. I never really probed my mom about the question of just like, because the thing is, I've sat with myself in therapy and meditation. Like, when attraction happens, it's only toward men. I really wish it wasn't, because I don't know if I can't. I'm not gonna go into that.
Can we talk about that?
Like, have y'all met men? Oh my god.
Have you met them?
Yo, cis men are not okay. So yeah, I just I want I that's a question that sits in the back of my mind. I never felt unsafe because I know my mother is somebody I
Yeah.
can talk to. She's probably in the chat right now. Um and I know I'm her only child, so like she has to love me
Yeah.
regardless and deal with me getting drunk texts, at 3 a.m. and come pick me up. She has to deal with that. It's just something that always was in the back of my mind if it were different. And she's, something with asexuality and like coming out and like questions that I get a lot when I do talk to people. It's like, well, how are you going to have kids in this economy? First of all, but two, I was
Yeah.
just like,
No
there are
thanks.
ace people who do have children.
Yeah.
CM, if I can get a shout out for CM, who is an amazing content creator. She plays a lot of Final Fantasy. She is married and she has a son. She is also asexual, and that is something that she
Awesome.
talks about that. And I want to kind of like shift over to like intersectionality because talking
Yeah.
about how those things interact and interwove with each other. Because I
Yeah.
always feel like in queer spaces, I have to prove myself, or I have to call on my friends to like come and defend me on Twitter. They say like, "Oh, I love being ace." Literally, it could be a post like, "I love being ace," and it's like, mm, not you. And I'm like, is it because I'm black or you're gatekeeping queerness? Because I can't tell. So
I
usually other
mean,
people come and handle that for me. um, I want to read the definition from about
yeah.
intersectionality. The intersectionality is defined as the interconnected nature of social categorizations such as race, class, and gender as they apply to a given individual or group, regarded as creating overlapping and interdependent systems of discrimination or disadvantage by Kimberly Crenshaw.
Kimberly Crenshaw.
That is a lot of scholarship words. We're just going to make it
Yeah.
very simple.
Yeah, like very simply, it's understanding that in individual people, well, in first internet, that no identity is a monolith.
Right.
There isn't a monolithic ace experience or gay experience or male experience or black experience. None of those are monolithic. Our other identities, the other identities that we inhabit. So, like for me as an asexual, I'm ace, I'm cis, I'm male, I'm white. All of the and also like class is important, religion
Yes.
is important, all of those other things
Yeah.
that each of those things impact how my asexuality is either privileged in spaces
Yes.
or I am further oppressed in a space.
Yes.
And that's really what that's what Kimberly Crenshaw is talking about is like how our the intersections of our identities make us more oppressed or more disadvantaged by the society or make us less more privileged and are more advantaged
Yeah.
in the society. Yeah.
And when people have privilege, a lot of people don't want to acknowledge that. And the thing is, it's
No.
like we all have privilege in this world. I'm for the most part able-bodied. I'm able to get up and go to the grocery store if I need to. There's like there's something I guess like with I don't know the word. This is people just don't want to admit that, or they feel like guilty admitting they have privilege. But I'm like, we all have them. It's just
Yeah.
how they intersect with each other, and also like how a lot of things are more visible versus not visible. Like the visible
Mhm.
thing is like, I'm black. You can see that I'm black.
Right,
I
yeah.
get followed around the store, even in Target, when I go to buy one item from Target, y'all. um so it's just like how those things are constantly interacting with each other when you go into any space. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's, like, really important for us to, to under to be thinking about those as we move through different spaces.
Yeah.
So, like, as I feel like, yes, I work really hard at all the stuff I make for Ace Dad Advice, but the fact that I am a middle-aged, white, cis male has a lot to do with why certain opportunities are either brought to my doorstep or come my way. And like I understand that the platform and the opportunity space that I've been given is impacted by the identities that I inhabit, and that those things are not necessarily handed to other people, and those opportunities are not necessarily like shifted that way. I think we just have to, whenever we're moving through spaces, try to like recognize where we are experience, where
Yes.
certain parts of ourselves are helping us out in that space.
Yeah.
And when folks who are not in those privileged spaces say to us, "Hey, you really should pay attention to this. There's a my experience is this, and it's different from yours." To just
Yeah.
listen and pay attention to
Yeah.
it, and also do our best to kind of make with whatever privilege we have, try to make space when we can, try to like lift people up and bring people into our spaces,
Yeah.
and try as best we can to create opportunities for the people around us
Absolutely.
who aren't. moving through the space the way we are.
Yeah, definitely. I know like that is a big component that I'm always big on. I'm always the person like I want people to tell their stories, and it doesn't need to
Yeah.
come through me or speaking on behalf of, if I can hand people the keys to my platform and people do with that what they will and speak about their experiences, like I'm very much willing to do that and have done that.
Yeah.
Um, another thing I want to talk about is asexuality and relationships.
Hmm.
You talk a lot about relationship reframing, which has actually been really helping me because that whole feeling inadequate or do I talk to this person? Um, and I think you kind of touched on it in the beginning of the conversation of, it's a privilege to be able to know that part of you. If you could talk a little bit about like relationship reframing and communication, I'd love to hear like your perspective on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think like this is something that's kind of born out of my relationship with therapist over time. Like, I had a
Mm,
therapist who was really great about because I have anxiety disorder and
same.
like writers. That's
Yeah.
that's our space.
Yeah.
And so that was reframing. I thought was a really important part of my process with my therapist about anxiety. Where it was like identify the thoughts that you have that are kind of blocking you or holding you back. What are the things that are keeping you from taking opportunities? And find a way to reframe that thought, to break it apart, break down the part that isn't really the truth, and find another way to sort of approach that same situation, but that opens up opportunity for you. And so that's when I started making the reframing posts, to try to take feelings that I have in relationship with people. And when I am feeling imposter syndrome or when I am feeling down on myself, I take those ideas and try to find a way um, to reframe them so that I'm positively opening doors for myself instead of closing them on myself.
Yeah.
And I think it's super important in relationship because of how much we are told asexuality is wrong, broken, or non-existent. We asexual people, I think, tend to have an attitude of apology about asexuality when it comes to dealing
Yes.
with other people.
Yes.
We enter into relationships going, "I really hope you like me." Even though I'm ace, and I hope you can still love me even though I'm ace. And I know that like it's probably a burden that I'm asexual. We're asked to apologize for ourselves all the time, and there's nothing to apologize for as an ace person. Asexuality is just another part of the human experience. It's another way to move through the world, and it is part of what makes us who we are as people. So our partners are lucky to get an asexual person if we are the dope human beings that we are otherwise. Like, I'm a pretty I'm a cool person, you're a cool person, and asexuality is part of that. So why I don't apologize for the fact that I'm a writer or that I'm a theater nerd or a horror nerd. Why should I apologize for my asexuality? And
Yeah.
I think that's like the number one thing when we're dealing with other people is to recognize that we don't have to apologize for it. We can ask people to love it the same way we ask them to love any other part of us. And the person who doesn't, it's not like we're harming them. They're the wrong person.
Yeah.
They're the wrong person for you. If someone thinks that your asexuality is a joke and thinks you're broken, they're not the right person for you. So don't waste your time on them.
Yeah.
Go find the person who sees your asexuality and goes, "Ah, cool, just another part of who you are."
Yep.
They exist. I have two partners who do that. I found them. If nerd me can do it, I know much cooler people can do that as well.
Yeah. I one thing like I also reflected a lot on after reading your book is like that term like brokenness, because
Mhm.
that is something that I felt like I think all my life, like when people were when I first started I heard the word sex and I'm just like there's something just not connecting here. Or when you talk about like physical intimacy, like I think you in the beginning of your book you're talking about you like holding hands or cuddling, watching movies
Mhm.
and things like that, but it's just like that other part, and it's just like, well, why don't I want this? Like this person wants this. Like why am I
Yeah.
not like them? And that's like that was really hard. Like it's very I'm still working through facing that part and just like that acceptance part. And then I guess from that accepting that part to being a better communicator about it, because I do
Yeah.
feel a lot very apologetic. It's just like I don't like I was about to say sorry, but it's just like that it's just like I don't want to do that.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
it's hard. I mean, I think it's we should expect that like the journey is ongoing because I'm like literally I wrote a book about this, but I still do it. I
What?
still have those
You wrote
feelings
a book?
too. I still have those feelings too.
Yeah.
Like, we go through because the world is what it is, and the world is constantly telling us that we are broken.
Yeah.
It's okay to sometimes like feel that way, and so, not always be like 100%. But if we're working toward not apologizing and realizing that we are not broken, it's just another way to be in the world. That's it. And it's pretty great. All the ace people I know are amazing.
You messing up my Fenty. It's Black History Month. I told you. I told you not to come for my Fenty, Cody.
I deeply apologize.
Reparations, no.
I deeply apologize.
One thing, speaking about a lot of the things and barriers that we face, oh, where's my microaggressions one? Uh-oh. Well, okay, well, we'll go back to the main stage. Let's talk about microaggressions.
Oh.
Yeah, those. I'll tell you a microaggression I faced. Somebody said to me, in person, how are you asexual? You're Black.
Wow. Just like that?
Just like that. Now, I had somebody who was with me who observed that conversation, who is also ace, and they walked away. They were like, I'm not dealing with that. I'm like, I wish I could walk away with you.
I mean, the amount of unpacking you have to do on that one.
I'm like, one, why would you leave me here?
Wow.
Yeah, so this just saying you can't be Black and ace.
I guess you can't.
Happy Black
I guess
History
like
Month.
you and Yasmin and Shabi and everybody's just gonna like evaporate into space.
It's
like
gone.
You just can't do it. Oh. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
I know you talk about a lot of the ones like, you get the ones like asexuality isn't real, or it's just a phase. How do you, when you hear microaggressions, when you're faced with them, how do you combat them?
Like, it depends. It's such, and microaggressions are such that like they're not the kind of thing that you can uniformly establish a way of responding to them, because in certain social situations it's sometimes just easier to nod and walk away.
Yeah.
And just be like, forget it. It's important to record like those kinds of things. One, again, it's the don't signing for the package. They're not true. They're almost always rooted in some kind of aphobic idea in society that is designed to make you feel bad about yourself. So none of those microaggressions represent a truth about asexuality or a truth about you.
Yeah.
So when they come up, and that feeling starts to bubble down, like, I'm like a piece of garbage because like maybe they're right, maybe that's true, maybe this is so. It's not. It's
Yeah.
that external stuff. Don't sign for the package. And if it's somebody's like, if it's a teaching moment for you and that's your bag and you can like turn into ace educator in that moment, cool. Maybe you can help that person learn something. If they're a real jerk and just deserve to be taken down right there, take them down right there, or just walk away. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
whatever is good for you to sort of manage your own wealth, your own safety and health, that's what you do.
Yeah.
But don't feel responsible to teach the world how to not be aphobic. Like, nobody shoulders that burden all the time, and like maintaining your spoons and maintaining your like well-being is more important than teaching some person who says, "Yeah, how can you be asexual? You're Black." Like, no, but literally no one has the time for that.
And the thing is, honestly, like you talk, like as a Black woman, like I'm so over like educating people, because I know there's some people on TikTok who have said this more elegantly than me, but I'm gonna say this: it feels like in content creation, like to blow up on certain things or certain applications, you either have to subject yourself to a lot of racism, you have to educate people for free, for people to then just take your words and then rehash them and put a white face on them and say like, oh, look at me being a great ally. You literally just stole that from this person 2 TikToks ago. But like, for me, it's just like I'm kind of over it. It's 2023. We have access to google.com just like everybody else, or TikTok or anything like that. Like when it comes to asexuality, I think I'm a bit more lenient. I think when it comes to Black issues, I'm just like,
it's 2023.
No.
Yeah.
So yeah, when it comes to asexual, I think like it depends on like, do I feel safe with that person? So the person who said that to me, absolutely not. I think I ended up just like awkwardly sashaying away. I'm like, no.
Yeah, like,
oh no, I go
And
to the nether room.
yeah, and like that's important. Safety is important. If it's
Yeah.
not a safe situation, if it is, if you feel doesn't feel safe, get the heck out of that situation. You don't have to be there.
Yeah.
You don't have to be super educator. Get out of it.
Yeah.
But
What
don't sign for it. Don't believe any of it because it's all BS.
Yeah. I also, like I said earlier, a lot of my moderators, and a lot of my friends who are in the content creator space, especially like on Twitter around Pride, they usually come to bat for me. They're like, "What you not gonna do? First of all,
Mhm.
you better leave her alone." um, so I want to say, who is in real life or fiction, who are some ace representation that you'd like to spotlight?
Um, s It's represented, I really love the book, it's the Claire Kahn's book, Let's Talk About Love. Let's Talk About Love, right?
Yeah.
What a great book. That
Yes.
is a fantastic book. Go buy that book.
Yes.
I think it's like a wonderful story, and I think the ace characters in that top notch. I also really like a book by TJ Klune called How to Be a Normal Person. It's one of the few books where or that I've encountered anyway that has male ace characters as the protagonist. And it's all they're also the character's also nerdy, and so like I'm into
Yeah.
that, and it's funny and it's a cute story. I know that he's into some problematic waters for other earlier book
Ooh.
for more current books now, but I did like that book and it was great. And um I read a lot of nonfiction, so like they're real people, but like two people I think who are doing really amazing work right now are Angela Chen, who wrote Ace, the
Hmm.
book Ace, which I think is like a fantastic book, and Sharonda J. Brown's Refusing Compulsory Sexuality, a Black Asexual Lens on Our Sex Obsessed Culture. What a fantastic book.
Hmm.
Like, that is the book. It just got a Stonewall Honor Award,
Oh, that's
from the
awesome.
ALA, like, well deserved. That is a fantastic book, and, like, anyone who cares about ace stuff should be reading that book.
Yeah. I know for me, so I'm more of like the fiction gal. For me, so I talked about this actually at VidCon. I was invited there to speak about asexuality, and I was asked, because it was so VidCon, they're a bunch of nerds and stuff like that, and a lot of us were talking about video games and representation. And for me, I said that Aloy from Horizon Zero Dawn
Mm, mhm.
was who I felt was an asexual character. A lot of her responses to like advances by people are like very similar to mine. I'm just like,
Yeah.
so the dots are not dotting for
I love
me.
it.
So yeah, she's somebody I definitely like. Oh, I'm just like, she's an ace character. We need more. We definitely,
Yeah.
definitely need more out there, especially I think especially when it comes to also romanceable characters. I would really, really like to see that like in a Dragon Age. I know there's a new game that's coming
Mm.
up. I'm so sorry, my cat is being
Huh.
horrible. He's very needy. I would like to see that like in a fantasy situation where you're not broken, or you're not the character isn't presented as like somebody who's broken or somebody who needs to be fixed.
Yeah.
So no pressure, BioWare, but put it in there.
Yeah.
But yes, also all the stuff that you mentioned too, like that.
And
Big
just
ups. Mhm.
we need more of it in general. I want to see
Yes.
like more diverse ace representation,
Yes.
different experiences, different kinds of being ace, and then I also want to see stories where like it's ace people, more stories about ace people who are not worrying about being ace. They're just like
Yeah.
ace while doing something else cool.
Yep.
Um, More of that.
Please.
Like I wanna see ace horror, I wanna see more
That
ace
part.
fantasy, more ace science fiction, like, just show me ace people doing cool things.
Yeah. And especially if they're black, have them being loved on, just in a respect. Like, I- I'm so tired of being a side character, and we like, child. Anyway, that's a whole
Yes.
different discussion.
Yes, yes.
What does my last question before if the audience has any questions?
Yeah.
If you have questions, please put them in chat. And I'll try and read off a few before we close. What does Ace Joy mean to you?
Um, Ace joy means feeling comfortable in my own skin and with myself, but also, like, the feeling the joy of, like, knowing I'm not broken and being in community with people who also know they're not broken,
Yeah.
and getting to share my experience with them and theirs with mine, and like just knowing that there's this community of people out there that understand how I move through the world. That to me is like ace joy. This is ace joy to me.
I was gonna say it. I was like, this is
Like
it.
it's
Yeah.
this. Yeah, like you're an enormously cool human being and I get to be in a community with you. And that's so great. Like it's
Yeah.
amazing. That to me is ace joy, especially after so many years of feeling like I was broken, where I did not feel joy about this part of myself. That's what it means to me.
Yeah. And also getting a bond over Kenny Rogers. But
Yes.
so for context, chat, before we
Yes.
started the stream, we had a whole bonding session over Kenny Rogers.
Yes. Kenny Rogers forever.
Yes. He actually was a huge inspiration. I'm like, I gotta learn how to play poker. And literally because of that song.
I'm it, yes. Oh, what
Very true
have
rules
you've
to
seen the
live by.
movie, right? Have you seen the TV movie?
I haven't. I didn't know there was a movie.
There's a TV movie. Yes, they made a TV movie of The Gambler.
If my mom is in chat, you didn't tell me that. I'm gonna talk
Yeah,
to her later.
there's a
Um,
TV movie.
we have a question
Mhm.
from Kelsey. If you could tell your younger self one thing in regards to being ace, what would it be?
You're not broken. That would be the one like you're not broken. Even if it takes you a while to figure out what this is, just like know it's not brokenness. Because I carried that with me for a very long time through a lot of different relationships of feeling like I was the problem, or feeling that I had to somehow fix myself, even though that was impossible, and that there was just something deeply wrong with me. That would be the one thing. Like, take your time and figure it out if you need it, but it's not brokenness.
Yeah, I think
And
I,
like, get better fashion sense, I guess.
I'm screaming.
Maybe that.
Do we have any more questions for Cody before we sign off here? We have another question from Patrick. Aside from doing reading and learning, what are some good ways allies can support people who are ace?
Um, I think that's this is particularly like for people in queer spaces because this is like my big thing. If you are in any kind of queer space, either a friendship group or you're like working in any kind of queer capacity where you're like organizing queer people, and you're not ace, stand up for the inclusion of ace people in those spaces. Make space for ace people in other conversations about queerness because so often we get left out of them. A lot of times you'll be in a space and they'll say like this is representative of the whole LGBTQ plus community, and nobody's talking about anybody after that plus. And none of those people are present and being accounted for.
Yeah.
Um, to be a good ally, just sort of stand up for our experience in conversations. If somebody's like, when somebody says, sex is essential to being a human being, gently correct them. Like, no, asexual people exist and they're also happy and human. That's an experience that is outside of that belief.
Yeah.
Include us in spaces when you see us not present.
Yeah, absolutely. Because also, I know for me, like, when companies, when I work at a lot of companies and they're doing work and they say, LGBTQ plus, I always push them. I said, if you have, because I know Twitter has like limited characters, Instagram doesn't. Well, it's
Mhm.
like you got to write like a whole novel to reach it in Instagram.
Yeah.
But, I say if you have the space to do it, if you could do the LGBTQIA plus 2S, because I
Mhm.
know the A isn't just asexual. You have aromantic, you have
Mhm.
agender, like that. The A carries.
Yeah.
There's a lot of us
A lot of
under
people.
that A, and also for two spirits, including our indigenous community, including the indigenous communities, because that representation you want that to be there as well.
For sure.
And speaking about those intersectional lenses, when it comes to cultural things, so that's very important. That's one thing that I really do push for every single year with the companies I work with, or maybe people who reach out for consulting. That's one thing that I
Yeah.
definitely push for.
For sure.
Another question. We have, what are some of the best, this is from Gnome with Iron Hands. What are some of the best ways your partner reassures you that you are not just seen but understood and loved?
Mm.
Oh my God.
Um, so that's lovely. My partners are really good about this. Um, the best thing that they do is just give me space. They're to give me space that is without pressure, and that wherever I am, I can sort of say to them, I like, I'm not really feeling like I want to be in any kind of physical, intimate space with a person right now.
Yeah.
Or, like, hey, do you feel like fooling around or cuddling or whatever? No, that's not where I am right now. We use a scale, actually, a number scale. So they're like, what number are you at? So I'm like, if it's a 1, like, step back.
Yeah.
Um, and they just take the answer and they make space for it, and there's no whining, there's no complaining, there's no sad face about it. There's just like acknowledgement and understanding, and that feels so good.
Yeah.
And validating. It feels like understanding.
Yeah.
They're making space for my aceness, and that's lovely.
Yeah. I hope to have that one day, honestly. I one thing I think that I'm learning through therapy and developing my communication skills is that not only am I a sensitive person, and it takes a lot for me to actually like say that out loud.
Mhm.
Like I am very sensitive. Like I will cry. And I'm also a Scorpio, so watch it because I might swing on you too. But also like
Yeah.
I'm somebody who needs reassurance. And depending on the days, depending on maybe the constant level of reassurance that I need, but it's okay to like need that and have that in any kind of way, whether that's like physicality, but also like in my aceness, because
Yeah.
with relationships, that question is gonna come up. So what do you want to do next?
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm telling you, when I read that part, I'm sorry, apartment aside, when I read that, I was like, my stomach dropped because I'm like, I
Fuck.
hate that question so
It's the
much.
worst.
I hate it.
It's the worst.
I want to thank you so much for your time, Cody. There it is.
It's backwards because of my camera, but yeah, it's a real thing.
It's
I
real.
still can't get over the fact that it's a real book. I love it. It's a real book.
Listen, I'm gonna be buying myself copies and I'm gonna give them out to my
Uh,
family. Okay.
no, we're gonna work on that. You will not have to buy a copy. I
Aw,
will.
I want to
I'll
support.
get
We gotta support.
I mean, yeah, but also.
Where can we find you outside of this conversation?
Yeah, so I'm at Ace Dad Advice on TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. All those places. And my website is acedadadvice.com. All of those places connect to everywhere else. So if you find me in one of them, you can find your way to all of the other ones.
Awesome. So, I mean, thank you so much again for your time. I know you're about to start your whole tour and
Yeah,
traveling and speaking about your
yeah,
book. I hope that
I
this was a
know.
cool way to kick it off.
It 100% was. And like, thank you for what you do. Thanks for this conversation and this space and this time. I think you're just fantastic. So,
Aw.
like, thank you.
I'm working on taking compliments, so I'm
It's
gonna
hard.
say
No,
thank you.
my therapist has had that conversation with me. So yeah, like
Okay, so I'm
I
glad I'm
got
not
it. I
alone
got it.
there.
Not at all.
So if you are listening to the podcast on Spotify or anywhere that you listen um to the whatever we're doing, the discussion, I'll have all of Cody's information down in the description. Please follow him on everywhere. Please buy the book. And again, thank you so much again. I appreciate
Thank
you.
you. Thank you. Same.
All right. Have a good night, everybody. Behave, drink water.